Hey everyone, my name is Chloe, and today I'm here to talk about the books that I read last week. So it just seems fitting that we have the baby here because we are 2 weeks old and in a deep, somebody has to hold me at all times stage, which is great. It's so snuggly, it's so sweet, it's so fun. However, it's less fun in the middle of the night. And so for that reason, I'm getting a lot of reading done because we are up a lot in the middle of the night. So let's just go ahead and talk about the books. There is only one middle grade that we read together. So it is What's the Big Deal About Elections? And this was so good. This is short. There's a whole series like What's the Big Deal About? And so it's short, but there's great pictures inside. And it just gives a really basic rundown of the American electoral system, and we read this right before the elections, and so the girls kind of understood a little bit more what was going on. So I would highly recommend, and they want all the others in this series, so we'll see. Okay, so now let's talk about some random reads, because the rest of my reads, aside from the middle grade and these random ones, will fit into either Historathon or Nonfiction November. So let's talk about the random ones. So first we have A Moment of Weakness by Karen Kingsbury. This is number 2 in her Forever Faithful series. The first one was Waiting for, I don't know. I'll put the title up on the screen because I can't remember, but I really liked it. It was the one about, it's a Christian fiction about a mother who loses her husband and one daughter in a drunk driving accident and her kind of quest for revenge. And this is the sequel. However, this has nothing to do with those first two people. And this is a story about a coworker, basically a coworker, and this was awful. This is about Jade and Tanner, and Jade is so long story short, Jade and Tanner were high school sweethearts or something like that. They had a moment of weakness, as you will, and he went to somewhere for a mission trip, and on that trip, she found out she was pregnant and told his mom, and his mom said a bunch of things about that kind of being his MO, and so she moved on with her life, and in the 3 weeks that he was gone, married somebody else, raised this child as if it was somebody else's. Okay, so then that somebody else who is her husband or whatever, it's like 10 years later, and he tries to sue her. He wants to leave her and tries to sue her and take custody of the child because she is imposing her Christian beliefs on him. And it was so unrealistic, and just awful. Like, I didn't believe it at all. The whole premise was super dumb, and I didn't buy the romance. I didn't like any of this. So hard pass on this. I actually don't. I own number 1 and number 3 in the series. I don't own this one, and it was on my list of ones to look for, but definitely not going to be doing that now. Then the other kind of random ones is I finished the Restoration series by Terry Blackstock. So let's see, we've got Nightlight, True Light, and Dawn's Light. And so I'll just hold up one of them and tell you that, so the first book was a dystopian about a world in which everything has stopped. Cars stop at a dime. In a moment, everything stops. Power goes out, water goes out, cars don't run, etc. So if you can bend your mind to think that's possible, then this series was great. The first one was awesome. I really loved it. Loved just seeing how people coped and how they went back to more primitive ways and what human nature does in that time and how kind of self-absorbed we are. And I just love that. And the first one did not really end on a cliffhanger, and the rest of these are continuing to follow this community. And we do know why the power and all of the stuff is out. But we're just kind of trying to follow life. And I would say 2 of these are kind of just women's fiction, interrelational dramas, and then one is more like a thriller because there are killings happening. And so they all felt, I just really liked being in this world, and they all felt good. But I will say only the first one is really dystopian. The rest are just, that's the backdrop, that they're living a more primitive way of life, but that's not what the stories are about, if that makes sense. So I would highly recommend the whole series. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad to have read it. Now, let's get into the Historathon reads. So there's not a ton, but we've got The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. So I read Room by her, and I enjoyed it, but this one I thought I would love, and I did really like it. I gave it 4 stars. This is in Ireland in the early 1900s, around the time of the Spanish flu, and we are following a nurse who works in the maternity ward, and I will say this is gruesome. The majority of the book takes place in like one room, honestly, and there's different births talked about, different things, medicines, women, and their stories. There's a lot of discussion of how these women get there and different not great relationships that got them there, as far as incest and all that kind of stuff. So this is definitely a heavy book, and despite the fact that it all takes place in one room in a relatively short period of time, I was really invested in this. However, what I did not like is there is a romance near the end that I thought was awful. Just awful. Not that I didn't ship the romance, but I didn't. But the inclusion of a romance in general, I just thought cheapened this story. I didn't like it at all. We don't need a romance to convince us that there's an emotional connection between people. I am just a firm believer that you can have an emotional connection with somebody and not have a romance, and it just felt out of place. I didn't like it at all. There we go. So now this one bridges the gap between Historathon and Nonfiction November. So The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Whew, this was a heavy one. So Corrie ten Boom, her family was from Holland, and so they were Dutch, and they were the book starts at the aftermath of World War I, but the majority of it is World War II. And they were helping people who were being persecuted at the time. So they get caught, and her family is sent to internment camps, and she's the only one that survives. And so it's her story. The amount of faith this woman has, and just her whole family, and the way they handled such a horrific situation was so inspiring. And this book was just hard and heavy, and yet faith-filled and hope-filled. And I just can't even fathom. I can't even fathom. This was a really great book, and I would definitely recommend. I do think some things happen pacing wise, some things happen really quick, some things don't. But it's definitely what clearly stood out to Corrie ten Boom. When it's a memoir like that, I don't feel like that's a fault of the book, because she's not trying to give you a history lesson. She's trying to give you her experience. So I really enjoyed it. Then, let's see, we have A Life Impossible, living with ALS, finding peace and wisdom with a fragile existence. So I got this one from the publisher a long time ago and have not read it. And I didn't know who Steve Gleason was, and yet I was so intrigued by this book. So he was a football player and got ALS, and so obviously debilitating. And he was talking, it's really his experience of his entire body shutting down, and yet his brain is fully intact. He's fully aware of what's going on. He's fully aware of his limitations and just how hard that is. And I cannot fathom. It is my worst nightmare. And it explores his experience through that, but also his marriage, and how his marriage does or does not survive it, and how all relationships change when you are physically unable to reciprocate anything. He can't speak, and even the speaking devices that he has are slow. So he says so often people just leave the room before he can get a response out, because it's all based on eye movements. And it's fascinating. It is fascinating. It's heartbreaking, but so good. I really love this. I love nonfiction, you guys. I really do. Then we have 2 more that I had differing results. So this one is Bonding with the Blonde Women and Other Signs of God's Grace by Ellie LaFaro. So I saw Ellie LaFaro. She is a Christian, a women's Christian speaker. She speaks at a lot of women's conferences. I went to one years and years and years ago and bought this book. And she's funny. She's a great speaker. This book is a series of 2 to 3 page just stories about life, and then the last paragraph always ties to faith, and some of them were very strong stretches. It was and I am not a short story person. I don't enjoy them. So despite the fact that I liked her writing style, I just found no real inspiration in this book. So there's that. Then we have Your 2-Year-Old, Terrible or Tender. And so I showed these on my Nonfiction November, shelf spotlight. So I'll link that down below. But I had a bunch of these, and I am just going to let them go because these were published in, I think, the early 70s, and so much has changed about everything since then. And I also feel like it's really hard to write such a short book and try to cover so many bases about children in general, because this is kind of the premise that 2 to 2.5 is kind of smooth sailing, 2.5 on is really hard. All of my kids have hit the hard stage at different stages, and it's just all, I mean, it's so individual, especially in these younger years, that I feel like this was not very applicable to me, so letting that one go. And I felt similar to the 6-year-old book. I do feel like there's a little more broad statements you can make as they get a little older, but anyway, I'm going to unhaul all of them. So then the last one is one that I don't have physically. It is Deprogram Diet Culture, Rethink Your Relationship with Food, Heal Your Mind, and Live a Life Diet-Free by Supatra Tovar. So this is a new release that I saw on NetGalley, and it was a short listen, and so I decided to listen to it. I would say it is a very basic kind of intro to deprogramming your mind from diet culture, and really talking about who you follow on social media and making sure that it's life-giving to you, and that the things you're taking in are feeding positive body image, positive relationships with food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And mantras and mindful eating and just things that are somewhat basic, but always a good reminder. And so I gave that 3 stars. It was fine. So that's everything I read. Let's check in on Readathons, because you guys know I'm doing all the Readathons this month. So I made a little graphic, because I've told you I'm doing Nonfiction November and Historathon. I'm kind of going to ignore the prompts just because, I mean, I could make them all fit, but I'm just trying to read historical fiction and nonfiction. But the other one is Winterathon Bingo. So I'm going to insert my bingo board. I have yet to get a bingo, but I am close on a lot. And they're a little bit different than my TBR was, but let's see. Let's see if I can tell you where I'm at. So over 400 pages, we have Dawn's Light by Terry Blackstock. A 5-star prediction was Pull of the Stars. An audiobook recommendation was The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. TBR veteran is That Bonding with the Blonde Women. It's been there forever. Friend recommendation, The Deprogrammed Diet Culture. I had heard some recommendations about that, so I'm calling it a friend. And let's see, newest addition to the shelf is the What's the Big Deal About Elections. I just got that for the elections. Then under 300 pages, we have this Your 2-year-old book, and continuous series. We've got either the Karen Kingsbury or the Terry Blackstock series. And then a thrifted book is Bring Her Home by David Bell, which I read last week. So that's just the whole month of November. So I am feeling confident that I'm going to get at least one bingo. I don't know. So I'm missing Snow on the cover, which I may get, but I'm kind of saving those for December. Start a series I'm definitely going to get, because I'm only planning to read this book for Nora November, and this is the start of a series. So this is still the plan for Start a Series as well as Nora November. Like I said, there's my Winterathon progress. I have yet to do, the C.S. Lewis Readathon, a Christian nonfiction. I've read The Hiding Place. This is going to be my sci-fi. I won't go through my whole TBR, but Christian nonfiction. I've hit. Also epistolary or spiritual warfare. Definitely some spiritual warfare in The Hiding Place, and a Christian autobiography. So all those count for Nora November. And I think that's it. So later this week, you will see my bucket listathon TBR, and I'm going to try to fit in some of the books that I have not read in my November TBR onto it. So we're going to see how that works. I think, like I said, it'll come out later this week. So fingers crossed we can make it work, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.